Hi guys, and welcome back to another tutorial. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my secrets on how you can create this warm and moody color grading effect in your photos just using Lightroom. And if you'd like to follow along with the same photo, make sure to go ahead to the link in the description where you can go ahead and download it for free. And I'm going to start right now. Right guys, so once you've got Lightroom open, what we're gonna do is head over to the develop panel, and then what we're gonna do is drop down to the basics panel. Now the first thing we want to do is to affect our white balance. To create this warm and moody effect, what I recommend doing is actually emphasizing a lot of the warmer hues while de-emphasizing a lot of the cooler hues. And one of the best ways to do that is actually by using the white balance tool. So we've got our white balance here. Currently it's 5100 Kelvin, so I'm gonna slightly warm that up by going to 5500 Kelvin. Now underneath that, we've got our overall exposure. Now at the moment, I am finding this image a little bit dark. So what I'm gonna do is actually increase this by one entire stop. But to combat the washed out look that sometimes can happen when you go ahead and actually brighten your photo, we're gonna go ahead and increase our contrast. We'll probably increase it by around about 15%, but we'll affect that later on when we actually have a look at the tone curve, because when you do have an underexposed image or an overexposed image and you use the contrast slider, what it will do is it will equally add in brightness and shadows directly. So it will just increase the amount of dynamic range. The problem is, if you don't have an absolute perfect exposure, your already dark shadows will start getting darker and darker and it will ruin the image. Or again, vice versa, if you've got an overexposed image, it will make your highlights even brighter. So what we can do is actually target the exact exposure we want or the exact contrast we want inside the tone curve, and I'll show you how you can do that by creating a simple S-curve. Now let's drop down to our highlights here. Now we really want to bring those down, so I'm going to bring those down to around about -60 in this photo. And then what we'll do is we'll go for our shadows, we'll brighten that up a little bit further as well. Now if we actually have a look at our histogram, we can see that it's not touching the far left and far right, which means we've got a little bit more room to play with our dynamic range. And the easiest way to fix that is by targeting our whites and blacks. So if I've got these two sliders here, what we're gonna do is go to my whites here, I'm gonna increase those by +15, and then blacks here, I'm also gonna decrease those -15. And as you can see, it's now touching the far left and far right of our histogram. So we've got all the dynamic range that this image has got to offer. Now we've got our texture, clarity, and dehaze. Now with texture here, I'm gonna increase those by +10. Clarity, whenever I'm involving creating a warm and moody look, I do like actually reducing the amount of clarity. I think it really works to emphasize this look, creates a little bit of a softer look, and it works really well when you've got portrait or if you're doing any wedding photos. So what I'm gonna do is drop that down by around about -20. And then haze here, I'm gonna increase that by around about +10. I'm actually gonna leave vibrance and saturation alone in this photo because what we're gonna do is actually mess around with them a little bit later on when we actually color grade it in step 2. So that's all we're gonna be doing in the basics panel. We're gonna exit out of the basics panel, and now let's go ahead to the tone curve. Now, if we actually have a look, we can see that again, it's very shadow orientated. This image is quite dark. So what we want to do is to bring up more of the highlights while not necessarily affecting the shadows to add in that contrast. So all we will need to do to create a simple S-curve is make a point roughly where the highlights are, and a point roughly where the shadows are. And depending if your photo's under or overexposed, what you wanna do is to basically bring up those highlights, again, bringing up the balance of those, and then slightly bring down those shadows there. And we can see we're adding in that really nice contrast, but we're adding it in the way that it needs, or the way that the photo needs. And that's really important. So we'll go for something like so. So again, we'll do the opposite if your photo is overexposed. So you'll bring down the shadows more while not necessarily affecting the highlights. But because we've got an underexposed image, or the image was shot underexposed, we can bring more emphasis to the highlights versus the shadows, and that works really nice. And that's all we're gonna be doing in step 1. Now let's go ahead and move over to step 2, which is color grading. Now inside color grading, we're basically gonna be using two tools. We're gonna be using the color mixer tool as well as the color grading tool. So now let's start off with the color mixer tool first. And let's start off with hue. So because we've got skin tones in this image and we don't want to affect those skin tones, we're actually gonna skip out reds and oranges throughout this video. So let's go straight to yellow here. Now there's a lot of yellow in this image. We've got all these crops here and it's just not looking very vivid. So we're gonna make them a little bit more green. So what I'm gonna do is just emphasize that by going +30 in the yellow, and then +30 in the green there. And already made it nice and green. It's a little bit saturated, so we'll affect that a little bit later on, but I'm actually really happy with this effect. And then with the aquas here, I'm gonna drop those down by -30, And the same with blues, we'll drop that down by -30, adding a little bit more of a tealy look. This will be really noticeable in the sky. There's no sky in my image, but if there was sky in your photo, you'll definitely see that affecting in your image. Now let's go ahead over to saturation. Again, skipping out reds and oranges, we're gonna go straight to yellows here, and we're gonna drop those down by -30. Now with the green here, we're gonna drop that down a little bit further. We'll drop that down by -50, and then aquas and blues, we'll drop that down by -30 and -30 there. Again, what we're doing to create that warm and moody look, we're actually removing a lot of those cooler hues, and we'll do that a little bit further in color grading, but we just really want to emphasize those warmer hues. And to do that, we can actually remove some of those cooler hues that might be making the image a little bit cooler versus warmer. And then what we're gonna do is head over to our luminance and basically brighten up those colors that we need to. So we're gonna got our yellows here, we're gonna brighten those up by 10. Same with the greens here, we're gonna also brighten that up by 10. And then aquas, we're gonna darken those down by -20. And then blues here, we'll also darken those down by -20. And that's all we're gonna be doing in the color mixer tool. So we're gonna exit out the color mixer tool and now go to color grading. Now with color grading, we're gonna create a split toning effect. If you'd like to know more about what split toning is, go ahead and watch this video here where I go a little bit more in depth on how you can use split toning to your advantage. But what we're gonna be doing in this video is basically add more warmth to the highlights and add a smidge of cool to those shadows to overall balance the image. Because we don't want to make the image look too warm, because otherwise it will make it look like a sepia effect. So we need a little bit of balancing. We can do that in the shadows. So let's head over to our highlights first. Now the highlights are predominantly where the sun is coming from. So we go ahead, nice warm hue. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and select a hue of 35. If you wanna go for a bit more of a redder look, just simply reduce that number. And then we've got our saturation here. So I'm gonna increase the saturation probably to around about 30 in this example. Now, if your image is very overexposed, you don't want to go too high because the image can look a little bit too yellow. So I'd find around 10 to 30% seems to work for most images. And to balance this image out, what we're gonna do is go to the shadows. I'm gonna go ahead and choose a nice blue. So I'm probably gonna choose hue of 215 and then add in a small amount, a very small amount of blue. So no more than 10 in this example. What I might actually do is reduce it a little bit further if I'm still finding it's a little bit overpowered. I'm actually really liking this effect. What I can do is show you the before and after of just the color grading tool. If I do the before and after, it's a subtle change, but it really does work, especially in the highlight regions, which we're just about to emphasize. That's enough we're gonna be doing in step 2. Now let's move over to step 3, which is local adjustments. Now, local adjustments, or masking as it's known inside Lightroom, is great when we want to emphasize or de-emphasize certain hues, or we can really affect our exposure. And that's what this photo, I think, needs. So what we're gonna do is exit out of the basics panel, and what we're gonna do is head over to our masking panel. We're actually gonna create probably about 4 masks, but 2 important masks, and the other 2 masks are just gonna help with this overall image. You might not necessarily have to do it for your photo. So the first mask we wanna do is emphasize more of the warmer colors coming from the right-hand side of the image. Now, you wanna look roughly where your light's coming from, and that's what we want to warm up. So what I'm gonna do is simply go ahead and create a simple linear gradient. Look where your image is, where's the light source coming from, and then you just want to select that. So I'm gonna go ahead and select something like so. So I'm gonna go for right-hand side of my image. What I'm gonna do is slightly warm it up, but I'm just gonna warm it up by 0.25 of a stop. But I'm gonna go to my temperature here and increase that to around about +30. And we can see how that's impacting our image. Now I'm finding it's a little bit too sharp. So what I'm also going to do is I'm gonna go down to my effects here. I'm gonna drop down my texture by -10, clarity by -20, and dehaze by -20. That'll add a nice soft look to those highlights, which will work really nicely, and it's something I like doing for most of my images there. But now the image looks a little bit too bright, so now we need to combat that by adding in a shadow mask instead. So what we're gonna do, we've made a highlight mask, again, create new mask, and this time I'm gonna go ahead and create a linear gradient. And this time I'm gonna go for something about here, and I'm gonna affect the other half of our image. Now I don't want it to affect the bride and groom that you can see here, so I'm probably gonna stop about here. And all I'm gonna do, simply go to my exposure and bring that down. What I might do is actually affect a bit more of the bottom of this image. So I might make it a little bit bigger. So anytime you brighten part of your image, you also want to darken your image. You want to create this nice contrast. And you can see it starts off bright on the right-hand side and gradually gets darker the more we go to the left. And I must say, I really like this effect. Now there's 2 more masks I actually want to create, and it's more specific to this photo. So what I'm gonna do is create a new mask. This time I'm gonna go ahead and select the brush. And I'm actually going to select this walkway because I'm finding the walkway a little bit bright. And all I'm going to do is go to my exposure here and just nudge it a little bit darker. So I might go for minus 0.25 there. Again, just de-emphasizing that walkway. I found the concrete a little bit bright there. And we've got the bride and groom here. So the last one I'm going to do is create a new mask, radial gradient this time, select a fairly small mask, so something that looks similar to this. And all I'm going to do, it's kind of a cheat here, I'm going to have them as our main focal point of the image. So I'm going to bring that up by probably 3.5, so 0.35 of a stop there. Might make the mask a little bit bigger there so it's not as strong. And I'm having the feather at 100%, so it's very nice and subtle. So I'm basically using them as a focal point. I might actually reduce this down a little bit further, 0.25 there. And that's all we're going to be doing. And the masks create a massive impact. So what I can do is actually show you the before and after of our masks. The image looks way better in my opinion, but there's a few more things we still need to do. So let's move on to step 4, which is photo effects. Now in photo effects, we want to do 2 things. Firstly, I want to create a post-cropping vignette because I think that's what this photo needs. But also we need to do a little bit of removing. There's some people in the image that I don't necessarily want in the photo. So firstly, let's go ahead down to our effects here. And I want to create a post-cropping vignette. So as you can see, I've got my vignette here. All I'm going to do is choose minus 20 and go ahead and select that. Now, this is a little bit too strong. So what I'm going to do is go to my feather amount here. I'm going to increase that all the way to 100, adding a nice subtle vignette, which I think works really nice for this photo. I almost do it to every single one of my images. But there's a few people in the image. If I go ahead and zoom in, you can see we've got 3 photographers there, and we've also got a person in the background. I think this particular image would work best if they weren't in the image. So luckily, we've got the cool generative remove tool now inside Lightroom. So I'm gonna go to my remove tool here. I'm gonna go ahead and select these people. So I don't want him in the image. That's the photographer. We've got the video guy here. We're gonna remove him as well as we've got this person kneeling down. I'm guessing he's probably the drone operator in this image. And then we've got someone working the fields over here. So we'll remove him, and there's a person in the background as well. Basically just removing any distractions from the photo. Now what I recommend doing is turning on use generative AI, unless you don't want to do that, and simply go ahead and click remove. And in a couple of seconds, they'll be gone from our image. And there we go, they've been completely removed. Now you've got 3 options, but actually I think option 1 works great. If we zoom in, it just doesn't look like they were even there in the first place, which is absolutely great. And now we're completely done. I am super happy with this effect. So what I can do is quickly show you the before and the after, and I absolutely love this effect. Really nice, really warm, and added that moody effect by still keeping that lovely contrast and a good amount of color. It doesn't look desaturated at all, which is really nice. But to show you this effect doesn't just work on this image specifically, I've got a few more examples. So I'll go ahead and move over to photo 2. It's got the exact same sliders applied. What I can do is show you the before and the after. I really like the nice warm look. And if I actually show you the masks here, I've only done 2 masks. So I've got a brighten or lighter mask on the left-hand side of the image, and I've got a darker mask here, although it's a mixture of two gradients. Again, just darkening, really emphasizing that. I absolutely love, you see the before and after, I really like how it's brought out those skin tones, nice and warm skin tones there. And then lastly, I've got one more image to show you. Again, I can do is show you the before and the after. I really like what the colors that it's applied to that grass there. Really like this warm and moody look, and don't forget to save it as a preset. So again, you can apply it to the rest of your photos inside your Lightroom catalog. And there we have it. That is how you can create this awesome warm and moody effect in your photos just using Lightroom. Thank you to all of my YouTube members that are currently supporting the channel. If you guys want to support the channel and get some awesome perks, including free Lightroom presets like the ones that you can see on screen, make sure to go ahead to the link in the description. I've been James for Photo Fever, and I'll catch you guys next week.